Hi, I'm Dee. I use they, she pronouns, and I'm the Ohio GSA Network Manager here at KYC.
And I'm Mallory. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Civic Engagement and Advocacy Manager here at Kaleidoscope Youth Center. And we are so excited to introduce our guests here today. They are three people here from the podcast I'm Feeling Queer Today, which, if you have not listened to it, I highly recommend after you're listening to this episode. Speaking really, of course.
First.
Yeah, finish this one, comment, like, subscribe, all the things, and then head over to I'm Feeling Queer Today. But before you do that, let's tell you a little bit about the Future Perfect Project, which is the host of the I'm Feeling Queer Today project. This is an organization that seeks to amplify queer young voices. They produce and facilitate creative workshops, media projects, and live performances of original work created by and about the current generation of LGBTQIA plus youth. And we are so fortunate today to have two of those individuals here with us. We have Eric and Trudy, so we'll let them introduce themselves.
Um, so my name is Eric. I use they, them pronouns. I live in La Crescenta, California, like a little north of Los Angeles near Glendale. Um, to describe myself, I mean, I think that that is constantly changing because I'm senior year of high school, so we're going to graduate soon and go off to college and do all that. So obviously everything's going to change, but as of now, I would describe myself as like a writer and a speaker. Speech and debate is something that I spend a lot of my time doing. And it's not just like expression, but I also use that as a platform for activism in like the little microcosm that it is. I also would describe myself as an artist, not necessarily in the like traditional visual sense, but when it's things like podcasting or other like writing workshops that I've done with Future Perfect Project, I definitely think that those are ways that I express myself and like explore my identity and explore the world and everything like that. But yeah, I'm so excited to like get to know you guys a little bit and have a little conversation.
And Trudy, how about you?
Hi, I'm Trudy. I use they, them pronouns. Yeah, to describe myself, I'm 19, and currently, I'm an actor and musician and um, an artist, and I really enjoy creating things and being a part of, I guess, other people's artistic process as well. Yeah, I was so excited to be a part the of I'm Feeling Queer Today and to be able to kind of participate in this and also create media for queer youth by queer youth. So yeah, I'm from upstate New York.
Nice.
Awesome.
Great. So we've got representation
All over.
all corners. That's great. Julie, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself too, and maybe talk to us a little bit more about what the Future Perfect Project is, because the I'm Feeling Queer Today podcast, which is why we're bringing you all on here today, I know is a production of the Future Perfect Project. So if you could just introduce our listeners to both yourself and the organization that you're part of, I think that would give some helpful context.
My name is Julie Novak, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a producer and a facilitator at the Future Perfect Project, which I'll talk more about in a minute. I also am a musician, I'm an actor. Um, I have co founded an organization called TMI Project, came before Future Perfect Project. Total coincidence that project is in the name, where I focus on helping people tell their true stories, especially the parts they usually leave out, because those are the ones that you can get the most relief from, the things that you're feeling most ashamed about. If you could find a way to release those and get the validation that you want, it opens up the space in your mind to do much better and beautiful things in life. Um, I got involved with the Future Perfect Project in 2019. Yeah, in summer of 2019. And I started off as a podcast producer because we were traveling around the country. That was our bread and butter at the time. We would travel to different schools and different queer centers to do these in-person workshops that sometimes lasted 2 days, sometimes 5 days. Um, and throughout the workshops, we would start off with connection and discussion and about who we are. And we always posed the question to the youth, what is some way that the world is bumping up against you because of your queerness? And so we'd have these discussions, and that would evolve into participants taking maybe a little deeper dive into doing a writing piece about their experiences, whether it was a letter to the future, a letter to someone who's not on board, um, a writing something about your identity, that just something that you wanted people to know. We've had exercises too where we'll have them write a letter to queer youth as themselves from the future. Just really cool stuff like that. Some of the workshops would culminate in a songwriting session that then they would perform at the end of the week. Ryan Amador and Celeste Sassine are the co-founders of the Future Perfect Project, and Ryan is a musician, songwriter, pianist, and really helped the kids craft songs out of their stories that they had written, find a hook. I mean, we have it's just an awesome experience. We brought Emma Jane Soslowski, another singer-songwriter, and just all around amazing creative person, in 2020 to start working with us. And around, what happened in 2020, obviously, is um, the pandemic. It grounded us, literally. We couldn't travel anymore. And we did this shift to all online programming. And it turned out to yield just the most amazing, diverse body of work that we ever could have imagined, because we had the ability to connect with so many people from so many different places who had so many different parts to bring to us about their experiences as queer youth in North America right now. And through those Zoom sessions, we got to know students a little bit more deeply. We got to interview some of them, and we created animations from some of those interviews as part of our series called Queer Youth Animated. Beautiful animations about what life is like, and also to illustrate that this generation of queer youth is unlike any other generation, especially me coming up. I'm 51. When I was 16, 17, I I didn't feel like I had a powerful voice. I didn't even feel like I could come out. I didn't have a sense of belonging, and I didn't have the resources. And this generation, social media has opened the door for these young people too, to some of them discover who they are just by going onto YouTube. They have more language. They have all these tools that, and this curiosity and this freedom to explore who they are that I didn't have. But it's also born out of the fact that my generation and generations before me did work to pave the way. So these young people now have this freedom to explore all of their identity, and also to say to you, and Eric talks about this in an episode called The Label Game, that you can change your mind, and fluidity is so important, and you don't have to settle. You don't have to put yourself in a box. People are changing all the time. And I think that some older folks in the queer community sometimes might look at all the experimentation and trying on as confusion, but it's really just curiosity and freedom and liberation that these folks get to have. So we're really proud to be a part of that. We started a record label as well called Future Perfect Records, where again, this stuff was all done over Zoom, which is amazing. Recording full albums with queer artists, helping them get distribution rights, distribute their music. We finally got to have a live show last year in New York City, and that was amazing, an amazing experience. But after we came up with Future Perfect Records, we were like, let's get back into this podcast idea, and maybe we'll do it differently. We're going to try to do it on Zoom. So we had kind of one little pilot group that created a test episode that we never ended up releasing, but we saw that we could do this, and we got this cohort together. We put a call out and on a few different places, and sometimes word of mouth, some stuff on like Backstage or Playbill, and on our social media. And we got 43 people applied. 12 were chosen, 10 stuck with it, and one, being Eric, we brought on board a little late in the game, but Eric, Eric has turned out to be just the best. Like, this modality, I think, is really made for you, Eric, because Eric is such a great speaker. And we also really found it that the majority of folks that applied that got in were AFAB, and white. And we wanted more AMAB representation. We wanted people that had the experience of being socialized male, bringing that queer experience. And also we wanted a little bit more diversity. And, you try for that as best you can. But it was important for us to try to, since we're saying this is a podcast that amplifies the voices of queer youth, we really need to show the spectrum of queer youth, and we try to do that as best as we can. But so yeah, we started the podcast and super proud of it. Trudy also brought so much to it as a producer, created so many awesome segments. And I'm really proud to say, I don't know if Trudy and Eric know this, but we're going to be featured on Apple Podcasts New and Notable during Pride Month. And that could
Congratulations.
boost stuff, boost our listenership quite a bit.
Oh,
That's awesome.
well, yeah. So Julie, you talked about kind of like the ideation of this podcast. But for some of our listeners who maybe have not taken the time to listen to I'm Feeling Queer Today, I just have to say it is an unbelievable production. I know you all just have one season out there, but the depth of the content is just so rich that if I didn't know that it was hosted and produced by like young people, right? I would just think that, yeah, y'all are professionals and you're out here doing the thing, right? It's very impressive. And the depth of the discussions, I feel like I'm sitting in a college class when I'm listening to some of these,
I'm like zoned like in. I feel like I find myself a lot of the times with podcast, and I love podcasts, but I'll find myself with podcasts, just I don't know, like zoning in and out or like whatever, but I'm just so consistently like engaged, which is so fun. It's hard to do that for me.
Yeah. But yeah, so I want to hear from Eric and Trudy what your experience is like with this podcast. And also, can you tell us a little bit more about like what it is, how it gets produced, who does what? Just let us in on the behind the scenes, if you will.
Yeah, sure, I can start. So I'd say how it started is that we all came together. So me and Eric were in separate groups actually. So we haven't actually met prior to this meeting, but nice to meet you. And but basically how it worked is we met over Zoom and exchanged ideas with each other. We had an initial meeting where we just introduced each other and got to chat over Zoom. And then we started kind of refining what are our ideas and like what are we interested in pursuing. And it kind of felt like a group project gone right because we were all working on each other's stuff. It was a lot of like Discord messaging and being like, hey, does anyone want to be in a round table where we talk about like masculinity? And then like maybe 3 people would be like, oh yeah, like that's for me, I'll talk about that. And but also it didn't feel like you were ever being forced into discussions, right? Because it's like, like I might not want to like sign up for that round table, right? If I don't necessarily like feel like, oh, I have a lot to say about that, right? So we got to really pick and choose what subjects felt like were good for us to talk about, and we would bring in segment ideas. One of my segments was called 1 Minute Trivia, I believe. So I would write up a bunch of queer trivia and and bring people in. One time I got to have Jazz Jennings on the segment, which was really amazing. Did not think I would get to meet her, but that was really awesome. And it was really exciting getting to work with all of the other youth in this program, because I feel like we were able to really collaborate and help support each other's ideas. We would also bring in what we had and then be able to kind of do a talk back where we say, okay, this is what is really working in this. This is what I think could be a little bit stronger. We could ask questions about each other's pieces. And I think being in an environment where it felt constructive but still supportive was just really important to me, because I think I've been in environments before with LGBTQ youth where it's felt very competitive or kind of like harsh. And it just didn't feel that way. It felt very collaborative and fun. And I think also having the structure from Julie and Celeste in the program, which really helped us create content and gave us a format, because I personally had no experience with podcasting before, but I knew of podcasts. I listened to them, and I think in particular our generation has grown up with podcasts. Like I remember when This American Life got really big and everyone was listening to that, you know, so like if me and my parents were road tripping, it's like I knew what was going to be on the radio, right? So we kind of have a unique position that way of growing up and seeing that form of media get really big. So it was a really exciting experience to be able to get support from our peers, but also to have great mentors like Julie and Celeste. So yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I will say with the podcast thing, it's always a mystery to me in this era where we have cameras in our hands or back pockets at all times, that audio is the thing. It's the medium that everyone is continuing to reach for. But I remember, you know, I'll date myself slightly, but in 5th grade, I had my iPod Nano and I would have my dad download podcast episodes to my iPod Nano.
In 5th grade?
In 5th grade, which were transferred to my iPod via iTunes, you know what I mean? And I would listen to like How Stuff Works laying in my bed at night, feeling like all edgy and cool because I was up past my bedtime listening to How Stuff Works. So
You're so fun, Mallory.
Yeah, I'm so hip and cool. Yeah, Eric, I'd love to hear about your experience as well, because I didn't realize that you two were in separate groups. So I'm sure it'll be fascinating to hear about kind of the differing experiences too.
Yeah, so like Trudy said, this is the first time that we're like having a kind of face-to-face interaction. So also nice to meet you. But even though we haven't actually had a conversation or sat down and talked about anything really, it still does feel like I very much know them from listening to their segments on the pod and just hearing all the wonderful things about them. And I think that's what's so amazing about the Future Perfect Project and I'm Feeling Queer Today and just like this platform and art form in general is it allows for that connection and that like learning about other people and seeing different perspectives, even if you never actually get face to face with someone. Now, when it comes to like my experience specifically with I'm Feeling Queer Today, it was a little different than Trudy's, just because I did join late, as Julie said. So I was not necessarily a part of those roundtables or part of that like early brainstorming. But something that I did notice is that even though like kind of getting thrown into it and kind of having no idea what was going on, I did feel like I was still very well incorporated, but more than that, I did feel very welcomed. I think that the environment created by Julie and Celeste and all of the youth that are a part of I'm Feeling Queer Today definitely creates the space in which those perspectives can be shared, but also in which it feels comfortable to do so because after kind of be given this opportunity and say, hey, do you want to join us on this podcast? And being like, sure, and kind of learning what it was as I was recording episodes, it was definitely like a really crazy experience. But I think that that environment that's created by it is what allows for the episodes that we create to be so meaningful and so personal. Is because not only does it allow people to be incorporated into it, but it also allows them to feel like they have that space to share those ideas. And then also back to that point of podcasts being kind of this modern media and like art form, I think that even though I did not have like an iPod Nano, I still very much resonate with the fact that it's like just being able to kind of sit there and not really absorb all of the stimuli that we often have in the world and just kind of like listen and really just be able to focus on what you're hearing and the voices that you're like trying to process. I think that is such a beautiful part about podcasting and connecting in this way is because it really does get to kind of the core of, I feel like, our perspectives, whether it's this podcast, I'm Feeling Queer Today, or any podcast really, because you're eliminating all of those little extra things and just focusing on voices and what people have to say and what they have to share. And that's something I found through all of my little podcasting experiences, and something I hope to build upon more. But yeah, that's definitely how I would kind of package my I'm Feeling Queer Today experience.
I love that.
I want to say I can't believe the two of you haven't met yet in one of the Zoom rooms because it blew my mind. I didn't realize the two of you have never been, I mean, together virtually in a Zoom room. But I do want to point out too about Eric being brought in later, is that we didn't meet you, Eric, until after we had put out the call for the podcast. Eric was someone that we did an in-person workshop in Glendale, California, who Celeste came back and Kiko, another one of our facilitators, and they were like, "Oh my God, Eric Eubank is this amazing person who is just gets us, and is really like just beautiful writer, beautiful person." And we had always been talking about Eric. And so when Celeste and I were looking at the full picture of the podcast, it was like, oh, Eric would be perfect for this. So that's kind of why Eric was brought in late. Like looking back, I'm like, I would have loved it if Eric had applied at the beginning. But I do think, as Trudy and Eric both said, I think it still worked out so well. And there was just an affinity of between podcast participants. Eric also knows, I think, so much about Trudy's work because Eric has hosted, I think, 2 episodes in which some of Trudy's work has been really the focus. So anyway, I think that's why I was like, you don't know each other, but anyway.
That's amazing. And something, I mean, we're getting very meta here talking about podcasts while on a podcast, but kind of connecting some of these things, like you two hadn't met before, and even if you had crossed paths before, it would have only been on Zoom, right? Because you're on opposite sides of the country. And, we're talking about podcasts, and something that always resonated with me and continues to do so is like, I'll listen to podcasts when I'm running, but also like at night if I can't sleep, like pop in headphones, right? And you hear just someone telling you a story, right? And I think that's so important about queer media, especially is because there are so many people, whether it's in LA or here in Ohio or just like middle of nowhere, wherever, people feeling like, okay, am I the only person feeling this way? Or am I, the only person who's experienced such and such life experience? And then to be able to hear stories from anyone, anywhere, right there, wherever you are, and just have your story reflected back at you. That's why I think it's especially so important that you all as queer and trans youth are like putting together these stories in such an accessible platform for people to be able to listen to. Yeah.
And to that point of never being alone, one of the episodes I hosted with another one of our producers, Sonia Mia, about mental health, episode 5, Coping While Queer. Um,
I was
so
listening to
that,
that one. Okay.
sorry. But yeah, we talked a lot about obviously mental health and all of those intricacies. But one thing that in all of the segments in that episode that a lot of people were reiterating is like the idea that you're never alone. And I think that that is a large part of the kind of the crux of I'm Feeling Queer Today, is that it's meant to obviously talk about the queer joy, but also talk about all of those things that it might sometimes feel like you are struggling with that no one else understands, and kind of just putting a voice to those thoughts of like, what's going on? Like, how do I deal with this? And then just like being able to listen to 12 queer youth across the country talking about their experiences and being like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. This random person in some state I've never been to like understands me. And I think that that's something that is really powerful.
Yeah, and like I was thinking about this too, because just in the work that like I do, my job is kind of like statewide. So I interact with our youth in Columbus that come to our center, and their lived experiences are completely different from one another. But then I go out to like rural Ohio, and those are youth that have never like been, I mean, even in a room full of like queer youth, but like let alone even like met a queer adult. There's so many times I go to these schools and I'm the first queer adult that they have ever met in their lives. And so like to have things like a podcast where they can pop in and be like, okay, so like obviously we know queer people exist, but like I remember when I realized I was like queer at 12 years old, I was like, cool, cool, cool. So like that's me, and we're just gonna leave it at that forever. And so to be able to like pop in, yeah, like maybe in the middle of the night when you're having these crises that you have in the middle of the night, like popping in a podcast and being like, okay, so like other folks are coping kind of with like this same stuff that like I'm going through. And it's just really cool too. I mean, at least here in Ohio, to like we're sitting literally here in the Midwest, but to like listen to young folks in New York or in California and be like, we can make it out into the world and like do the thing.
Or we could
Or
stay
if you're
in
Mallory, you can stay in Ohio forever.
Yeah, right. Well,
Uh,
I
well, oh, I was going to say Trudy, I think, wanted to respond earlier. Trudy, you had something I think you wanted to say. I just didn't want to miss you.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say on the note of isolation, I was kind of thinking, well, I was thinking about what Eric was saying as well about kind of like decoding kind of our experiences. And I was thinking about how also I think it's important, especially as youth, to speak to that, because I think that that is like a newer mindset around experiences, is not only looking like getting specific about what they are, but then also like, then what does that mean for that person, right? And what does that mean for like our collective experiences? I feel like that is like a newer mindset. Um and also I think that social media and screens can sometimes really like isolate us, but then there's also aspects like podcasts where it's like, oh, it's so collective, so communal, and I feel like can actually bring people together to hear other people's experiences. um and yeah, and also on another note, just around the fact that, we've been passing down, like we've been storytelling through, like our words and like speaking for, since way back when. So it feels like almost a newer take on an old tradition in a way as well.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great transition to a question that I've been wanting to ask is for the two of you, like what has I think you were previously saying this was kind of your first like dipping your toes into the podcasting world, but have you always viewed yourselves as storytellers? And if so, like what does that look like in the development of like that part of yourself been like? Just generally, but then also just navigating queerness and kind of how that, interacts with storytelling.
For me, I definitely think I'm very technical. I focus on like all the little details and figuring out the like correct answer and everything like that. So when it comes to the idea of storytelling, that's something that I think that I never really considered myself to be like in the realm of, because although, for example, like speech and debate, I talk for hours and hours on end. That's what I do for my weekends. Um, it's very much like analytical and answering certain questions or addressing topics or like world concerns, but it's not kind of breaking things down to tell a story or to explore myself or just express in myself in a creative way. But I think that through podcasting, I've kind of deconstructed that mindset a little bit and leaned more into the like creative, expressive, like loose, open everything that is storytelling and podcasting. Because I think obviously like this conversation we're having now, I can't sit there and think of every little detail. So kind of just what comes out comes out. And often I'm surprised by what I say. And then that makes me stop and consider like, hey, wait a minute, I didn't know I thought that. And then like that leads to a whole nother spiral in a good way of like, oh my gosh, there's so
that's
much
so
that I never considered. Say again? Sorry.
I was gonna say that's so real. I've been in a couple situations where like I kind of am forced to just kind of speak off the cuff. And it's one of those things where I turn my brain off and I'm thinking at the same time, I'm like, Oh, thank goodness that just came out of my mouth. Wow, I couldn't even had that thought if I tried, right? So I totally relate to that. That's such a good way of putting it, though.
Yeah, definitely. And then to the point of identity, I think that like exploring myself and how I navigate the world and exists in my surroundings, like as we've kind of broken down this little analytical wall, I feel like I've allowed myself to be more fluid with how I perceive myself and my identity. And I've kind of discovered that how I would label myself even is very much fluid. So I think that like in the process of becoming the storyteller that I and we all are meant to be. I think that like that has allowed me to kind of be able to like kind of this sounds so corny and awful, and I'm gonna hate after I say it, but like kind of read and understand my own story as much as I'm telling other stories. Because like I'm kind of understanding like all the context that I've like accrued through my life that I haven't really fully like understood. But now that I allow myself to see it in this like loose, like colorful way, then I now can kind of understand it more.
Yeah,
I
that's so
love
real.
that.
Not cheesy or corny at all. It's perfect.
Yeah, I would add on to that also by saying that, yeah, understanding yourself through other people and other contexts of other things. And even sometimes I'll feel like I understand myself more if I don't like what somebody else is saying. I'll be like, no, I don't identify with that. Or, like, or that's kind of an offensive thing to say. And then I'm like, oh, wait, I just learned something new that I don't like, which means I like this. So sometimes it's like even the opposite, when I'm cynical sometimes. But yeah, no, I feel like I I guess I've never like I would never use the word like storyteller, but now that I'm hearing it, I'm like, yeah, like I guess I am a storyteller. But yeah, no, I'm really into as a part of my background, I'm a comedian. I do improv and stand up, and a huge part of that is storytelling. But in my mind, I'm just going up to the stage and saying whatever comes out. But then it's like also under that, there is like, oh, I'm telling a story to the audience. And also with improv, it actually kind of mirrors what what we're kind of doing in the podcast, because it's like coming up with stuff and collaborating. Except obviously in improv, it's like more spur of the moment. So I find that in those two passions of mine, I find that storytelling does really come into play there. And I feel like in terms of queerness, I find that often bringing myself into certain art forms like improv or stand-up comedy, like reveals so much about the cultures of those environments, and also feels like just me being myself is like taking a stand in a way sometimes, because it's like I go to Bard College, and it's a very, very queer campus. And I had like had this moment when I used to be a head of our comedy club, and I like realized I was like, we only have one man in our comedy club. I was like, when does that ever happen? Like that, realizing that it's like, oh, building these like niche comedy communities are really important for people, because it's seeing to me, or showing to, I feel like, to myself, like, oh, this is really possible, right? Of building these communities, and finding other people where not only in LGBTQ plus specific environments where you can find each other, but also saying, okay, we can have similar hobbies and we can also have similar identities as well. So I'd say finding community through those things has been really important to me. But yeah, I'd find that honestly just I find that queerness intersects in anything I do, because I find that so much of the time, like, I came out in fifth grade and it was like no one knew what being non binary was back then. And so I feel like I was like a teacher for a lot of like my teachers, which is like, I probably shouldn't have been. It was a really weird power dynamic for them to ask me questions about my own identity. And I was like, oh, like, like, could use Google, but I guess we're doing this. And so, but anyways, it's yeah, so I find that, kind of also like my relationship with, being myself, and if that like ruffles any feathers, like how that has changed to like taking that so personally to being like, that is about that other person and not about me. So yeah.
I think too, on the topic of storytelling, um, this podcast is obviously for other queer youth, but it's also for allies or people who are not necessarily on board, who want to understand more about queer youth or understand more about their queer child who maybe just came out. Um, and I think that the most compelling part of the podcast has been the true storytelling, has been just the conversations that have come out of participants talking to each other and sharing these true slices of life versus, even Trudy had this great approach with wanting to do these trivia segments. Trudy, you had talked about some people might be a little hesitant or feel a little off put by sharing something deep, but Trudy would ask these questions and about queer history, for example, and then say, "What do you think about that?" Or "Do you have any experience with that?" And then they would feel loosened up enough to be like, "Well, here's my experience." So it's not only trivia and fun as trivia can be, but it also you get to know the participants and a little bit more about them. So it was really smart that way, and I just feel like that's what we're so excited about for the upcoming seasons as well, is just this intimate storytelling that we all know true storytelling is just the fastest way to create empathy. So I think, and podcast is so accessible and you can listen to it anytime, and it's an intimate thing to do. So it's like you have these voices telling these, like opening their hearts, telling these stories that really we're hoping can transform the way that a lot of Americans who are not on board might be able to hear their child in this or hear themselves in it and say, oh, that makes sense. So, and I'm just really proud of everybody's willingness in the group to do that. And for Trudy too, for just bringing that to attention of like, I think that we at the beginning, there was anything was in the playing field, but when Trudy couched that idea, it was like, oh, this is super super smart, because not everybody is like an Eric or a me, or like I feel very comfortable talking, and I think Eric does, and I think Trudy for the most part does, as far as I know, even though you do a lot of performing also on stage as an actor, which is a different kind of storytelling. But I really, I'm just happy too that we're getting to show this cross section of folks. And for our third season, we do have a second season coming up. For the third one, we're going to be, Kaleidoscope will be involved. We're going to be actually traveling. We want to go to every state in the union to hear the stories of the youth in that particular geographic location, to say what's going on here with who you are. And I have to say, we're going to be going to Spartanburg, South Carolina, which we've been to before, doing other workshops. And the applicants for this one, a lot of them are talking about like the South isn't as terrible as a lot of people think. Like being in South Carolina, there are actually places that you can find to be validated. And so it's just interesting. There's so many stories, and it's not always what we assume it's going to be like.
That's so real. And like we were joking about before, that's how I feel about Ohio too. Everyone's like, "Oh, Ohio, can't wait to get out." And I'm very much as you just described, thinking it's not so bad here all the time.
Mallory loves it here.
Well, I have a question, and we've kind of like danced around this a little bit, but talking about like in-person community, because both of you, I'm sure, have had the experience of like, being a student during the pandemic. And obviously there's a lot of loss of community during that. And we don't have to dwell on the pandemic. But, talking about the community formed because of this podcast, both because of the listeners who are listening from anywhere, and also the community that you've formed as hosts and producers. I am so genuinely curious about like where both of you find queer community in person in your own day-to-day lives. Because, we're sitting here at Kaleidoscope Youth Center, which is obviously a community center for queer and trans youth here in Central Ohio. But, as somebody who's 26 and also queer, I find that I have a harder time finding that in-person community because, when you get past a certain age, oftentimes it's focused on like bars or like you're out of college. Okay, now there's that loss of community, right? So I just am always so curious to know where people find their in-person queer community.
Sure, I can go. I It's a good question. I'd say for me, well, in high school, it was our GSA. It might have been called something else, but yeah, but our GSA was where I found my queer community. Definitely, I went to two very small schools in high school, so it was kind of like there was a piece of it where it was like if you're out, every single person knows, right? And it's like, and even in a progressive state like New York, I went to a boarding school. So it's like there's people coming from all different, parts of the country with different beliefs. And also it's high school and people are always looking for reasons to be kind of mean to you. And so I'd say that's where I found my queer community in high school. I'd say now, it's different. I mean, sorry, I'm just thinking. Yeah, honestly, meeting just during orientation, I met so many people. And then my friend group came out of that. And then, sophomore year, we're still going. So it does happen to some people. And I think meeting people through other people. And I'd say that while for me, like queer community is great, it's like, I'm looking for people I can connect with in all sorts of ways. And I find honestly that in my experience, sometimes I'm looking for like really open-minded people as friends, right? Who are, trustworthy and just curious. And I'd say that sometimes that comes from other LGBTQ plus people, and sometimes it's just people who are allies as well. And so, sorry, I don't have a well-formed answer, but I'd say, I don't know. Yeah, I'll keep it there. Sorry, I don't have much to say on that.
So solid.
You do though, and it sounds like the heater in your dorm room maybe is that I heard this like anyway.
I heard that
I
as
think it
well.
was great though.
For me, I definitely, like Trudy said, because I'm still in high school, my GSA is definitely like a little point of community that, not by default, because I don't want to say that it's like, oh, it just happened because it's there, because I very much want to be there. Everyone there very much wants to be there and get the support and the connection and the love from there. But I think that that's very much like an easy place to kind of build off of when it comes to community. Another like source of community that I found is there's this little flea market. It's called like Manic Pixie Dream Girl Flea Market. Really long name. Something with Manic Pixie Dream Girl in it. I don't know exactly what. But it's there every last fourth Saturday. It's there once a month. Like it's pretty close by, and me and some of my friends go there, and it's like, even though we don't keep in touch with all the people we talk to there, it's very much just like a little congregation of queer people, and then you feel that energy, and you're like, okay, even if I'm not seeing like queer people everywhere I look, queer people are everywhere. And then that just kind of like that sense of community where it's kind of like underlying implicit, just kind of feeling as though you're not alone, that whole concept that we've been discussing. I think that that's also really important. And then to what Trudy was saying about just kind of finding like-minded people, like people who are curious, people who are just like interested in the same things or interested in very different things. I think something that I have found when it comes to just gravitating towards other queer people and allies, and just kind of forming friend groups based on that and finding community there, is the idea of like open-mindedness. Because I think that like we as queer people like it's as open-minded as you can get, not just because obviously it's like to be queer is to just understand that things like transcend binaries and are very fluid. But I think also the fact that like also to be queer is to like be open to exploring yourself and exploring your identity. And I don't think there's not much opener you can get than that. And I think kind of just the shared experience of like, oh my gosh, I want to just like explore myself. I want to explore the world. I want to get to know everything about my identity and everything around me. I think that is kind of what makes like queer communities kind of find each other and like form because it's that shared like want to know more and explore and just be open about literally everything.
Yeah, I'd say just adding on to that as well. I find that as Eric and Julia both mentioned um, about exploration, but also the wording of it being confusion as well. I think there's this misconception that exploring your identity takes you away from who you really are, when actually it can a lot of times take you closer, even if it means like some cis people might be exploring their identities and then say, you know what, actually, I do feel more comfortable, identifying as cisgendered. That just means that, you're following your heart and trying to figure out what feels right for you. And so, yeah, 100%. And also, I'd say that honestly, for me, um, at my school, not to make this an ad for my school, but it's such a queer community. I've never ever been in a class, and my classes are usually 15 people or under. I've never been in a class where I've been the only one who uses they them pronouns, which has just never happened to me before. And I'm kind of like, guys, I could be a little unique. Maybe some of you can, come out a little later. No, I'm just kidding. But no, but that, I feel like, for me, being in a broader community where you really don't feel alone, in being who you are, I think is just such a blessing. So, yeah.
I think too, it is worth talking about how great Bard is. And the fact that it being a queer campus, you've gotten a chance to develop this piece of work that I want to share. Trudy is the musical director and co-wrote a musical with their friend Starla. And Trudy made it a point to fill these roles that were traditionally played by middle school girls with trans people. So it's like getting to just there's all this reimagining of everything now, and folks like Trudy are getting to lead the way in that because there's such a lack of representation in media for queer people. So Bard is a great place too that they've been able to you know create that piece.
That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was a great opportunity. Me and my friend over winter break, she wrote the script and I wrote the music, and now, yeah, now we're producing it. And just as Julie said, just to reiterate, it was really great. And yeah, and definitely like when we had trans people audition, I was like, can you play the boy band members? That would be so great. And it was a lot of that. And also the musical itself is kind of reworking how like boy band culture is seen, because from the title, from it's called Kill the Boy Band, it's based off of a book called Kill the Boy Band. It might seem like it's going to be about the boy band, but really it's about the relationships between these middle school girls, and how like they have crushes on each other, and how it feels so complicated, and also they're really mean to each other, and like how all of that like was portrayed. Also, it's in 2014. So, yeah.
I want to see this so bad. That was me in middle school in 2014. Like
I
literally.
I'm gonna have to find that book and read that for additional context. That is so cool that you're able to like bring that to life in this way. I love that.
I'm lucky enough that I live like 20 minutes from Bard, so I get to see it, and I'm so
Oh,
excited. And I mean, Trudy is an amazing songwriter, like unbelievable. I do a radio show as well and had Trudy and Starla on, and Trudy sang some of the original songs, and everyone was just like, "Oh my God!" Like just so awesome, so exciting.
Thank you so much. No, it's so great, I feel like, to showcase, like to be able to have the opportunity to showcase these experiences. And also I think also as an actor, it's like feels similar because I'm like trying to embody the characters while I'm writing the songs. In the same way I might embody a character while I'm acting the character. So no, it's so great. And thank you. I really appreciate that. But yeah.
I love that because I was listening to the episode of the podcast where you were talking about like queer representation in media. And I think a lot of times when we think of queer representation in media, whether that's in music, you know, with the pronouns people are using in the songs, or like, you know, TV shows, whatever, we have had so little of this that we're like, oh, we see two people holding hands and we're like, this is the best thing I've ever. But and then people think that that's all we
Oh my
want
God.
in media, but like
Right.
for you to tell the story of like, no, it doesn't just mean like having two men hold hands and like, oh wow, we're so radical here, but like to cast trans people in the roles that they deserve to play, or to even just consider a trans person for a role where it has nothing to do with their transness. They are just a trans person playing this role, period. And, you know, and to have queer storylines that don't just center around the, you know, relationships, right? Or like romantic relationships, but it's just like a queer person existing in the world. And so I think that doesn't come from people who are not queer or trans, right? Because like anybody else is just going to see that as a token character who has to represent queerness, just, you know, this one person has to be reflective of everybody. You know what I mean? So from what I understand of this musical that you're putting together, like it does seem so diverse in a way that, you know, quote unquote queer representation is not going to be from somebody who's just, you know, trying to add it in to get their
Yeah.
credit in the show,
Yeah,
you know.
like the queer baiting,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
the killing the queer character, or the like, you know, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
All the tropes. Yeah.
yeah.
I think too that what's really oh, I just lost my train of thought. Uh Move on. I can't remember what I was gonna say. Um hmm. I hate when that happens, but it happened. You know, what are you gonna do?
Well, I just have a fun fact. This literally has nothing to do with any of this, but you just mentioning Bard. My brother went to Bard College, but the Germany campus, the satellite German campus, and he's going to be going back again
Oh,
next year. So just hearing Bard, and I've heard all of his stories from, I obviously not Bard in New York, but just the same, you know, school. That's just interesting. So,
That's so great. Is it the Bard Berlin campus?
yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Yeah.
I know what I wanted to say about queer representation. Um, what's so important, like Mallory, you had mentioned that there are people in small towns. I think you both talked about this, that don't know a single other queer person or queer adult. And the thing about young people is when they see it, they know they can be it. And I think that that is what we need more of, is just visibility and like letting people know that you can make it till to 20, you can make it to 30, you can make it out of high school, you will be able, hopefully, to find a place where you belong. And just knowing that that exists, I think can give young people so much hope. So that's another really important thing about queer representation. I mean, when I was young, there was nothing, there was no media for me to consume. I thought as soon as I realized I was gay, I thought my life is over. Like I just didn't, I couldn't see it. Um, so I love being able to use this platform that we have to not only create an experience for the youth in the cohort who have created the podcast, but create this experience for people listening that can really uplift them and provide them hope. And so I'm just so proud of everybody that's all the young people that have done this, and so proud of the project, and really happy that we get to share about it today with you.
Well, we so appreciate you having on, and that having you on, and this is like a good segue because we should wrap things up here. But I want to know, and I'm sure there are others who are listening, how can people get involved either with the Future Perfect project? Is there opportunities for people to get involved with that? or the podcast? You mentioned that people had applied to be hosts, to be producers. Is this something that's an option for people, or is the best way to support just by liking and subscribing to all of the things, right?
Liking and subscribing, but also we do have ongoing applications for different programs. Um, right now, I'll put a call out to queer youth centers across the United States. Like, we're looking for places to host in-person workshops for season 3 of the podcast. I'm not sure when we'll do another open Zoom cohort across the country, but you can always find out by joining our mailing list. And we also have our Future Perfect Records, which I think will be engaging in its 4th cohort for the 4th for their 3rd full-length feature album. I think that's going to be happening in the fall. But you can go to the futureperfectproject.org and see all of our different offerings. People can actually, any time of the year, we do a bi-monthly writing workshop called Writer's Room, which Eric has come to quite a bit, and that's really great. There's different topics. We have guest facilitators sometimes who are writers or artists. You can find us on social media across platforms at the Future Perfect Project, or if you just wanted to reach out and find out more by sending a note, you could just email contact@thefutureperfectproject.org.
I love it.
And find us on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts.
Yes, right. Yeah, you got to give the official plug.
Yeah.
Well, it has been so delightful to have you on. I'd like to have you all leave us with just like one positive thing that we can carry with us after listening to this episode. I want to know something that you're looking forward to. It could be literally anything, but just something that maybe is getting you through, the end of the school year, or, springtime is a time of like new beginnings, right? So what's something
Exciting
you're
stuff.
looking forward to?
Something I'm looking forward to tonight is I just got a bunch of new tea, drinking, trying new kinds of tea. Love.
Nice.
Of
But that's
course.
something that I'm looking forward to. The little things, very important.
That's a
Also
real lesbian
springtime.
at heart. Sorry.
Oh, yes. Yeah. hmm Definitely. But also springtime, flowers. Flowers are wonderful and they are blooming.
Mhm.
That's all.
Love.
Literally the same.
I'd say I'm looking forward to, well, my laundry. I have a lot of laundry to do, but I'm looking forward to when I don't have a lot of laundry to do anymore and when it's
Yeah.
done and out of the dryer and folded.
I didn't think there'd be
Amazing.
something more relatable than what
The
Erica
tea,
just
but
said.
now.
That's so real.
I have to. Oh, go ahead, Trudy.
No, I was just gonna say, and also for the Future Perfect Project to continue releasing episodes if I'm feeling queer today. Also that.
Yes, we have 3 bonus episodes coming out. 1 in May for Mental Health Awareness Month, and 2 during Pride Month. 1 being a part of it being Trudy's trivia session with Jazz Jennings. So great. And one thing I'm looking forward to is getting to meet y'all in person, traveling this summer to a couple different locations to work on season 3. And also personal travel. My wife and I are going to Italy for 2 weeks. I've never been. We're really lucky we're getting a chance to do this. It's something that, you know, we love to travel. I was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago, and my treatment stuff has been up and down, but I've been feeling really good with the treatment I'm on. So we're like, well, you're feeling good. Let's do this trip because it's, there's a lot of walking and there's cobblestones, and, we couldn't necessarily afford it, but we were like, let's just do it anyway. So we're going to do it. She's been before. I'm super excited to see so much art and so much history because I'm a total geek. I studied Greek and Roman architecture and stuff. So I'm really excited about that trip.
Very
That
cool.
is so exciting.
Wow.
Are you
Yeah.
excited about anything, Mel?
Am I excited about anything? Oh my goodness. Well, we're going to see a professional women's volleyball game tonight. By we, I mean both my partner and I, but also a lot of folks here at KYC. We were lucky enough to get tickets to see the Columbus Fury play. It's a brand new team. It just started playing, I think, in January of this year. So it's the Pride themed night. It's fan appreciation night. I'm assuming there's going to be swag giveaways, but also getting to watch women play volleyball professionally. Like that's so cool. So looking forward to
So
that.
fun.
That
Yeah.
is so
What about you, Dee?
I'm going to a new vegan restaurant after
Oh,
this.
nice.
So that I am not vegan, however, I am excited to go. So that'll be fun.
Love it.
I love all these answers. Awesome.
Yeah, we are all so very queer here. Nobody
We
gathered
sure
that
are.
from the additional context of this podcast.
Feeling queer today and every day.
Every single day.
The perfect notes to end on. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And as you've alluded to, Julie, we are so excited to have you all here at KYC this summer and to just, be part of the work that you all are doing and just keep it up. And I am so looking forward to those bonus episodes and every episode you put out after that. So
Yes. Awesome. Thank you both. Have a
yeah,
great rest of your day, good weekends. And thank you, Eric and Trudy, for being here to talk about your great work on the podcast.
Thank you
You
so
Thank you
much
are.
for
so
having me.
much. Yes,
Well,
this is so great.